Hey y'all. So today we're going to start talking about parallel lines and the special angle relationships that are formed by them. So I want you to remember that we've talked about in the past few weeks that parallel lines have the same slope. And if they don't have the same slope, then they're not parallel. And we also know that the symbol for parallel lines would be two lines with a little directional arrow in both of them. You cannot assume that two lines are parallel. You have to be given that information either through a diagram like this or by actually giving that information in words to say that your lines are parallel. So you can never assume that lines are parallel just by looking at them. You have to either see the markings or be given that information specifically. But if lines are parallel, if they are cut across by a line that intersects each of them, that line is called a transversal. And the prefix trans means across. So again, a transversal is a line that intersects two or more parallel lines. And when you have these parallel lines that are cut by or intersected by this transversal, they create or form special angle relationships. And that's what we want to talk about today. So again, if you have your two parallel lines and intersected by the transversal, the first angle relationship I want to talk about are corresponding angles. And corresponding angles are angles that are congruent, and they are, you have one angle that's above the two lines and one angle that's between the two lines, but both of the angles are on the same side of the transversal. So corresponding angles are on the same side of the transversal, and you have one angle that would be above the line and you'd have one angle that's between the two lines. So other pairs of corresponding angles would be, you'd have an angle here because this angle is between the two lines, and then this angle is outside. So these two purple ones are corresponding to each other, just like these two black ones are corresponding to each other. And the same thing would be true on the opposite side, or the other side of the transversal. This green angle would correspond to this green angle because they're on the same side of the transversal, and one is above the two lines and one is between the two lines. And in the same way, this red angle corresponds to that red angle because you have this angle is between the two lines and this one is outside of the two lines, but they're on the same side of the transversal. Corresponding angles, those are corresponding angles. Same side interior angles are supplementary, which means that they add up to 180 degrees. Okay. And it's just like it sounds. They're on the same side of the transversal, but they're interior. So both of these angles are on the inside of the two lines, but they're on the same side of the interior of the transversal. So another pair of same side interior would be this angle and this angle. So these two would be considered same side interior, and these two would also be considered same side interior. And each of them, each pair, are supplementary, so they're 180 degrees. Alternate interior angles are angles that are just that. They are going across the transversal, and they're alternating within the two lines. So these two black angles are alternate interior. You notice they're both inside the two lines, but one is on this side of the transversal and one is on the other side of the transversal. The same thing with these two red angles. They are crossing the transversal line, one over on this side and one on this side, but they're both inside the two parallel lines. Alternate exterior angles are also alternating across the transversal, but you have one above the line, parallel line, and this one is below this parallel line. The same way that this black angle and this black angle are alternate exterior because they're on opposite sides of the transversal, but each of them are above or below the parallel lines. Vertical angles are congruent, and vertical angles are formed by intersecting lines. So if you have this transversal intersecting that parallel line, so these intersecting lines form these angle relationships. So these two black angles are congruent because they're vertical, and these two blue angles are congruent because they're also vertical. So if you put this all together now and fill in the blanks, if you remember, we know that straight lines equal 180 degrees. So a linear pair would be two angles that are supplementary. So for instance, if I know that this angle measure here is 110 degrees, and I know that these are two parallel lines and they're intersected by this transversal line, so if that's 180, I know that this angle would have to be 70 degrees because 110 plus 70 would equal 180 degrees. So let's think about some of these other angle relationships that we could also fill in. I know an angle that would be corresponding to this 110 degree angle would be this angle because they're on the same side of the transversal, and this angle is above the line and this angle is between the two lines. So these are each congruent and they're each 110 degrees. And the same would hold true over here. If this is 70 degrees, then this angle would also be 70 degrees as corresponding angles. One is above and one is between. And let's talk about some alternate interior angles. So alternate interior angles cross over the transversal line, and they're inside the two parallel lines. So I have the 70 degree angle right there, and this 70 degree angle and this angle would also be 70 degrees. These are alternate interior angles. In the same way, this 110 degree angle would be congruent to this 110 degree angle because they're alternate interior. Let's talk about alternate exterior now. Alternate exterior cross over the transversal. So if you have 110 degrees here, it's outside the two lines, then this would be another alternate exterior angle. They're crossing the transversal above and below the parallel lines. Same thing here, the 70 degree angle would be alternate exterior along with this 70 degree angle because they are both above and below the parallel lines and they're crossing the transversal. Same side interior angles are on the same side of the transversal and they're interior. And remember, I told you these are supplementary. 70 plus 110 is 180. And the same thing over here, 110 plus 70 is 180. So these are all these angle relationships. There's one other type, if you remember, we talked about vertical angles. So we have the 110 and 110 and 70 and 70. So we have corresponding angles, alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, vertical angles, and same side interior angles. Do you also notice the pattern these are forming? So 110 plus 70 is 180 degrees, and 70 plus 110 is 180, and 110 plus 70 is 180, and 70 plus 110 is 180 degrees. So these angles alternate as well. It's really important that you know these angle relationships because you'll continue to use them throughout the year. So at this point, I want you to go ahead and do the lesson practice for lesson 7.1 and practice 7.1. And then we'll talk about, continue talking about the converse of these tomorrow.